Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my overview of Space for Sale. So for those not across it, I do overviews on this channel. I have a look at a game for the first 2 hours because it's the Steam refund window. Steam says you can make up your mind about if you want to keep a game or not in that time period, and I would generally agree. 20 hours in, not going to change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's broad strokes info, keep it around 10 minutes, short and punchy, and then you can make up your mind on your own. So this is really cool, it's really novel. It nearly snuck past me. No fanfare or anything, I barely knew it existed. Merge Game Studios is making it. However, it would seem THQ is publishing it, but almost as a silent publisher. If you watch the trailer, THQ's logo comes up, but they're not actually listed on Steam as having an association. I find that interesting. Some might find that dry and unusual, but I'm forever curious about what warrants fanfare from some of these bigger publishers. THQ is probably as big as a AA publisher you could possibly get. And they've had some real bangers recently and asking some very expensive money for it. So I'm kind of just curious why their name's kind of absent here and it's all very low key and quiet. But as an aside, Ubisoft's been doing stuff recently. They released a Valiant Hearts 2 game on Steam that no one knows about. Anyway, I find that curious. Mirage Games Studios, the guys doing this, double checked because the name was familiar. They made Little Big Workshop, which I was quite fond of when that came out however many years ago. And it's exactly what you'd think. You run this cute little workshop, you'll put together orders for a wooden chair, except you'll have to create all the different components. So, you'll have a machine making chair legs or the backs of the chairs and the seat, and there was a complexity to this woodworking bent, and I thought it was really cute and very cool. So I thought, yes, I would love to give this game a go, even though in the trailer, not that there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but it seems kind of very light for something that looks to be trying to do, like a colony simmer base builder. So I had my reservations, and they kind of stand. It is lighter, and I'm not saying that there isn't a market for it, but if you mix the fact that there's no real fanfare and they're not really doing huge audience outreach, I think the only people who are going to find this game are the hardcore Factorio type people, and they may be left wanting because this does feel like, a great entry point to getting someone into that genre, right? Someone who's maybe allergic to Factorio because it's so overwhelming. Something like this is actually quite clean and neat and tidy, and there is a pretty clever little system going on there that I've enjoyed. So before I get ahead of myself, broadly, you're playing as this soul space astronaut dude, essentially setting up a planet for visitors, inhabitants, citizens, whatever you'd like to call it. Similar to this thematic thing that you see in games like, your Dyson Spheres or even your Satisfactories. This frontiersman in space, man with a multi-tool trying to build something. It's cool. That stuff appeals to a lot of people. There's a reason why it keeps getting used. So you generate a planet and you drop down in your little drop pod. You control the dude, so it's not quite God Sim. It's not top-down RTS management. And you've got all these little biomes that are very clearly separated. They're more like territories. And within them, they will have some pretty strict build spaces. There'll be an anchor point that you can build an initial base on, and from there you can put all sorts of interesting buildings in there. Your usual fare of workshops and things like that to craft new tools. Teleporters, you can set a blueprint for a little buggy, and I've built quite a few of them actually. They're sort of essentially little shopping trolleys at this point, cruising around, but fast travel between the bases. And then you get to the citizen component. There's different tiers, castes, whatever you want to call it, much like something like Anno. In fact, this is like Anno, but way smaller scale. But it's cool as well. That doesn't make it a bad thing. It's just kind of different. So you start out mostly just trying to get yellow citizens, but I think there's 4 different colors. And yellow's kind of just all general purpose. So you build a house and they will inhabit that house automatically and they'll walk around. It's all very cutesy. The art's quite wonderful. And, they will have requirements, like they might require 3 food from your world cap. And so as you move around to these little biomes, because they do have their own biome specific resource generators, so you do actually become quite mobile. In fact, that's one of the strongest points of this. Usually with a base builder, you stay very static. Doesn't get much more than making 1 or 2 satellite bases usually, or branching little spokes on the wheel out from your base. This has you being quite mobile all the time. In fact, the more I think about it and speak about it, does a very good fusion of controlling a little action dude moving around and going out and interacting with the world. As I say, this Astroneer comes to mind, where it's less about creating, let's say, Factorio-style belt chain automation, and more about you still controlling a dude. It's not survival. You don't, I suppose you can die. I accidentally respawned a car on top of my head and died, but the wildlife is pretty tame, and it's not like you have food or hunger. But, the mobility and moving around and sort of checking on different parts of bases is part of it, and it works quite well. So yeah, there'll be requirements. And so maybe you need more food to get more houses for citizenry. Well, you can go over to this biome over here on the east and find food, not a geyser, but they're these marked little locations on the map. You go over to them and you can build a building on it. And essentially it's a straight trade, closer to board game mechanics than video game, right? Some of them just straight generate resources, others it will be a trade-off. And so you're sort of just going around to all these different biomes, building up bases, building up light infrastructure, going to these resource generators and trying to build the appropriate building as befits your needs at the time, because there might be multiple options, and they will, in turn potentially consume a worker, or at least as far as the balance sheet goes. So you might not be able to build this building unless you have a spare yellow worker, so that would be a cost for that, but you're kind of trading him for a higher tier resource. They're not really named so much as labeled with shapes. And then from there, say you have X yellow workers in this biome, you start building buildings within that biome space that they approve of, they synergize with. It's a little confusing at first, but essentially there are color-coded approval buildings, right? And thematically they start to come together, more sciencey buildings for the science dudes, and it adds as a sort of a force multiplier. So if you were to build a yellow building, like a water park has a yellow bonus to it, and you had 2 yellow dudes in that biome, then you're going to get 2 yellow reputation, 1 for each dude, because that thing generates 1 pip against each guy. So there's a synergy multiplicative component, and that in itself is contained to that particular biome, the population itself. So you'll have a cap, you'll only be able to build like 3 villages per biome. So then you're going to start specializing by color. So like, okay, maybe I branch out here in the buggy into this weird jungle, and because it's all so dense and small, you find, over the course of minutes, you've driven through, deserts and forests and what have you. So maybe you start making a science biome over here and you build the science dudes in there, but to get the resource to buy a science house, you need to tap a certain, maybe you have to build an observatory on a volcanic geyser, so you're going to have to go explore more biomes to try and find that and root out the little question marks, and you'll go and build there, and then you'll backtrack and get your little scientist dude in, and then you'll build a workplace for him, and maybe that generates more money or uses money and generates a different resource. So there's this puzzle combo chaining component to it. While it does broadly follow the hop, skip, jump of something like Anno, where you're trying to balance villager needs by caste system, it actually plays much more of a trading 1 pip for 2 of this back and forth, trying to get synergy and kind of solve the puzzle. It feels more like that to me. So it threads this weird line of solving the planet and being a light Anno type game. And I really like it, in case I haven't covered that. Like, it's difficult to describe because it is kind of fitting in its own niche. But that niche, who is it for? It's hard to say. If you're a Factorio nut looking for an automation thing with lots of belts and all that, that's not this, not at all. I feel like maybe people that like puzzle games would be more interested in this. But there's no denying it's really clever and cool and well realized. I was going to say polished. I stopped myself. I've had a few bugs that have been kind of a pain in the ass. I had to restart the whole thing because I had like stuff clipping straight through the center of my map that just wouldn't go away. But yeah, at the very least, keep an eye on it. Again, it's early access. I don't know how many more biomes. Like, it's not like it would let me choose other tile sets other than that first planet. But even in their narrative construction, it's very much about getting the star rating up on your planet and giving it the tick, right? Now I haven't even managed to get to 1 star, and the star is all reputation gated. So I've gotten into a rhythm in the first 2 hours, so there's definitely gameplay there. There's definitely stuff to do. But I do wonder what happens when, you get the first star or two and you sign off on the planet. Are they going to let us have a look at more biomes, or is that something that's not in early access? And it's as much as it's kind of cool that it's not held my hand too much. It taught me the basics and let me run wild. There are still some other questions that I can't really answer in this short amount of time. Bloated? I wouldn't say that so much, but definitely a really cool concept. At the very least, keep an eye on it if you find what I'm saying to be interesting to you. Anyway, cool little game. Nearly missed it. Glad I checked it out. I'd be curious to see how it goes in development, and again, on that sort of meta level, if it meets its targets, who picks it up, because again, very quiet, this game. And I do wonder if they've got THQ hanging over them, silent partner or not. Maybe something like that's a death sentence. Surely they have requirements in their agreement as a publisher. So I do hope to see this game hit 1.0 and revisit it then. But anyway, that's a little bit beyond the scope of the game itself, but I do find that kind of thing interesting. Anyway, team, should be out shortly. Check it out yourself. Might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.